Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we are taking a look at the legacy of Shimon Peres, who's passed away ahead of his Friday funeral in Tel Aviv. The U.S. president has said, the White House has said that Barack Obama would like to attend, but working on logistics. The French president also tipped to attend the funeral of the man who was 3 times prime minister, once president, and of course Nobel Peace Laureate. We're talking about it with Yossi Beilin, who was Israeli negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Welcome back from Tel Aviv. Welcome back from Ramallah. Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary General of the Palestine National Initiative. He too, a former negotiator on this. And academic Glenn Feder, Director of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Just before the break, Yossi Beilin was describing to us that those crucial moments that led to Oslo, where he had to keep the negotiations a secret from Shimon Peres. How did he react when you told him the news that you were working on this?
Well, that was very interesting, because I was afraid that he could say to me, well, I did not ask you to do anything, so don't surprise me with these things and stop it. And had he told me something like that, there would have been no Oslo process. But he understood the importance of such a breakthrough, of actually finding partners on the PLO for the first time. And that is why he decided to go to the prime minister with the idea. So he actually encouraged it rather than discouraged.
So what happened afterwards? Why is it that, you know, we've been seeing the last 24 hours, those images on the White House lawn of the signing, the images of the Nobel Peace Prize giving ceremony. What happened afterwards?
Well, first of all, we are speaking about a very interesting but humble effort. The Oslo Agreement was a humble interim agreement, and it was not a peace treaty between Israel and Palestine. And I believe that all of us paid the price for the wish of leaders like President Clinton himself, who helped us a lot during the way. But at that moment, it was important for him to show a success story, although, as you know, the Americans were not involved in the process at all. And by inviting both Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin to the White House, it was seen by the world as if this was the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that was not the story. And then when things went wrong, people said, but you know, there was peace between them, so why is it so? And there was no peace treaty. So besides that, the extremists on both sides surprised us. I remember myself thinking about the impediments which could have happened during the implementation of the agreement, and I did not think about an Israeli doctor, a religious guy, going to Hebron and killing 29 prayers, and I did not think about suicide bombing. I thought about demonstrations, perhaps even violent demonstrations, but my imagination was too limited to think about the awful things which happened when on both sides people believed that we actually ended their dreams. And this is one of the reasons why it was so important to try to go directly to the permanent agreement and not to stick to the Madrid conference invitation, which was our guidelines to have a 5-year Palestinian Authority, a strong police on the West Bank, and so on. By the way, I also agree with Mustafa about the point of settlements. I think that both sides paid a high price for not mentioning the issue of the settlement freeze. Why did it happen? Because our coalition was a very, very tiny one. And Rabin said to us and to the Palestinians, please, you don't have to mention it in order to poke in the eye of our coalition members. It is enough, you know, that we had the Israeli government resolution 360 already in 92, which froze the settlements. Don't push me to the corner. Trust me, I don't want to build new settlements. It is my interest, it is in my interest, not only in your interest. And the Palestinians understood it, and they gave up on this phrase. And I believe that it was wrong for us to demand it and wrong for them to accept it.
All right, let's pick up on several of those points, but of course the main one being the fact that when the Oslo Accords happened in 1993, this failed sense, as you say, Yossi Beilin, that there was this need to act fast. Yitzhak Rabin gets assassinated by a hardliner after those suicide attacks by Palestinians, the attacks by hardline settlers that had taken place. After that assassination, Shimon Peres takes over as prime minister, calls early elections to shore up support for the peace process. Then came, though, the breakdown of a truce with Hezbollah, a new war in South Lebanon, and the April 1996 bombing of the UN compound in Qana, where more than 100 civilians died. The following month, Likud's Benjamin Netanyahu would edge Shimon Peres by less than 30,000 votes in the election. Let me ask you, Glenn Feder, first of all. Less than 30,000 votes. Had Shimon Peres won, would he have been cowed by the hardliners, by the fact that, you know, the prime minister had just been assassinated?
I think that Shimon Peres never truly had the heart of the Israeli public. He was never elected, although he tried many times, he was never really elected by the Israeli public. He lost by a narrow strip with Netanyahu, and that had something to do with the what was happening at the time. But ultimately, I think that he wavered too much in his political career to appeal to either the left or the right in Israel, and didn't have a military strategy. He was looked more on as like a grandfather rather than a protector.
Let me ask Mustafa Barghouti on this. If those 30,000 votes had gone the way of Shimon Peres in the 1996 election, would history have been different? Would he have made good on the peace deal, because he had made that election campaign about shoring up support for peace?
I wish so, but I am not sure, because you see, the problem here is in the fact that I don't think any Israeli leader up till now has accepted the right of the Palestinian people to have a truly independent and sovereign Palestinian state, without Israeli control of our borders, without Israeli control of our capital, East Jerusalem, and without Israeli control of our natural resources. When we criticized Oslo in 1993, me and Haidar Abdeshafi, who was the head of the Palestinian negotiating team in Madrid, and well-known intellectuals like Edward Said, we thought we were in a very small minority, because people did not believe us. People thought peace was coming and everything was okay. But we saw through that the flaws of the agreements were at least four. One is that it was extremely asymmetrical, because from one side, the PLO and the Palestinians recognized the state of Israel, while Israel recognized not the right of Palestinians for statehood, but only recognized the PLO as a representative. This is the real joke in the process. Second, it did not include freezing the settlement or stopping the settlement activities. I am glad that Yossi Beilin agrees with that point, but the Palestinians made a mistake by accepting that, and the Israelis pushed for it. The result is that instead of 111,000 settlers, today we have 700,000 settlers. Third point, the agreement did not include a very clear agenda or calendar for ending the occupation. And fourth, it kept many Palestinian prisoners in jail. These four elements undermined, in my opinion, the potential for peace and for an agreement. Now, 23 years after Oslo, I think the majority are on our side. The majority are realizing that our criticism was correct. The difference between Madrid conference and bilateral secret talks in Oslo was that the international conference was based on international law, was based on international resolutions. And the Oslo agreements, the Oslo negotiations were based on only what the two sides decided upon. And that's what Shimon Peres actually wanted. Today, I think when I look back, I see definitely a lost opportunity. Seriously lost opportunity, because now we both suffer more. The possibility of two-state solution could be assassinated because of the growth of settlement activities. And the Israeli public has changed. During the 90s, after the first Intifada, when the Israeli public felt the fact what it means to be an occupying power, we had a demonstration in Israel with more than 400,000 peace activists demanding peace. Today you have an Israeli public which is benefiting from occupation, benefiting from a system of apartheid, and supporting extremists. Crazy people like Naftali Bennett and Lieberman. Naftali Bennett is calling for the annexation of the West Bank. I personally believe had the Oslo agreement not happened, and had we continued till we reach a real agreement about ending occupation, we would have been probably today in a different situation.
Do you still believe, Mustafa Barghouti, in a two-state solution? Is it something you still advocate?
I do, but honestly, as my Palestinian colleagues ask me, I frequently answer this question by saying, my heart wants it. My brain tells me it might have become impossible because of the settlement, because of the imbalance of power between us and Israel, and yet we will struggle. I believe the Palestinian struggle is not for one state or two states only, or either. The Palestinian struggle, which is not, unfortunately, perceived sufficiently in the right way in the world today, is a struggle for freedom. It's a struggle for dignity. I struggle for removing the checkpoints, for removing the limitation on our movement, for removing the obstacles in front of our children to get proper education, and for the sick people to get proper health care. I struggle to remove this indignifying situation where we are insulted every day by Israeli soldiers at checkpoints or at the bridge when we want to cross. We want freedom, we want equality, we want what everybody else has. I am very sad that many Israelis don't see that, and they classify Palestinians as terrorists and do not see the fact that we are people like them, people who deserve to live in dignity and people who deserve to live in justice.
Right.
So for me, while I prefer to have a two-state solution immediately if possible, even if that is killed, this will not kill hope in our life. We will find a different solution, but we will never give up our struggle for freedom and justice. Never.
All right. The last incarnation of Shimon Peres was as Israeli president, and you were mentioning there a moment ago. I'll put it to you, Glenn Feder, the perception of Shimon Peres, how it evolved over the year. He became a consensual figure when he became president.
Yeah, he shifted. Obviously, it wasn't far enough for someone like Mr. Barghouti. I think it's important to really listen to what he's saying, Mr. Barghouti, to understand the state of the mind right now of many Palestinians, and notice that there was absolutely no critique or even criticism of Hamas and what they're doing to their own people, let alone the Israeli people. But I want to go back to Mr. Peres because it's really his day, and show that, you know, even the liberal Mr. Peres, even the dove, even the Peres who loved peace and coexistence didn't go far enough for someone like Mr. Barghouti. Even if, and I just want to point out, even if Israel had given up parts of what they call the colonies in the West Bank, it wouldn't have been enough for someone like Mr. Barghouti. Sharon pulled out of the Gaza Strip, and look what happened. Now Hamas is launching rockets from that very land where Sharon pulled out from.
That's a
so
repetition
this is a
of
pipe
Israeli
dream.
propaganda.
This is a pipe dream that he's living in. And I think that someone like President Peres was illustrative of just how far Israelis were willing to go for peace, but it's not even close, I think, to what is demanded.
Or what Mustafa Barghouti did say, and is true, is that an increasing number of Israelis, as well as Palestinians, but mostly Israelis, including some inside of the cabinet, don't believe anymore in a two-state solution. Here's what Shimon Peres had to say about the peace process when he retired as president in 2014.
Right now there is a pause. I hope the pause will be over. Negotiations will be renewed. And the original idea, the agreed idea of a two-state solution will win the day.
Yossi Beilin, he believed up till the end. Do you believe?
Well, I think that this is the most realistic solution. I don't think that anybody can speak seriously about a one-state solution in which eventually, because of the demography, the Jews will become a minority in their own state, so the whole Zionist idea will become a joke. So we are speaking about the two-state solution. Most of the Israelis, according to the public opinion polls, consecutive public opinion polls, support this idea. It is also true that most of them do not believe that it will happen in the near future. But it means that if there is an Israeli leader who is ready to take the risks and to go for a real solution, not just to say that he wants to meet with the other side whenever and wherever, then he will find a very fertile land of support in Israel itself. And I believe that it is more or less on the Palestinian side, because the alternative for a two-state solution is an alternative which is totally unrealistic.
And when we look back at the legacy of Shimon Peres, we heard there the words at the outset of the current prime minister saying it's Israel's first day without Shimon Peres at this point. His last incarnation to a mostly ceremonial post of president, he became a beloved figure at that point. What do you take away from that, Yossi Beilin?
Well, it was, I must admit, not too difficult. I mean, as he took upon himself the function of a president, and by the way, he was not fascinated by the idea of becoming a president, and it was not his dream. But he took the job, and as a president in Israel, you cannot be partisan, and he became non-partisan. And once he did not criticize the government publicly, at least, and said things which were much more centrist, he got back the support that he had until 77. Because until 77, he was perceived as a star in the Israeli politics, somebody who could both get the support of laborists and of some of the center-right people in Israel, and he was very popular. So he became again popular, and only in the last 2 years, when he ended his presidency, he came back to his own ideas, which became dovish, in which he believed that the Palestinians are under occupation and deserve their own independence, and criticized the government for many mistakes that were committed by the government. And then again, people began to say, okay, here is the old Peres. This is the Peres that we don't like. We like the Peres who is a president who doesn't criticize anybody. And I'm glad that he had the opportunity to get back to the real Shimon Peres after the 7 years of presidency.
And just very briefly, because we're almost out of time, Yossi Beilin, what is the anecdote that stands out in your mind that tells us about the real Shimon Peres?
I don't know if it is the real Shimon Peres, but one of the things about Shimon is that he loved life. He was a person who liked to dance and to entertain himself. He was workaholic, and still he was not just behind the four walls. And I remember once visiting with him Morocco, and after a day in Morocco, he asked whether it was possible to go to a dancing show or something like that. And the security people around us looked at him as if, I don't know what, I mean, how could he, in a secret visit to Morocco, go to a dancing show? And after an hour, they brought the dancing show to the palace where we were hosted. And it was really a Fellini movie to watch us two in Marrakesh, in this hotel, with two seats, watching a group of about 20 dancers and musicians for an hour and a half. But this was Shimon. I mean, Shimon was the combination of somebody who loved to work, did not go on any vacations, but in the same time didn't give up on the nice things in life the way he saw it.
All right, we'll leave it there. Yossi Beilin, so many thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv. I want to thank as well Mustafa Barghouti for being with us from Ramallah, and Glenn Feder for this thoughtful look back at the legacy of Shimon Peres. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Green. So there you have it, a workaholic, but who also liked to go dancing.
That's right. And indeed, it is the picture that is being painted of him in many senses, a workaholic, a Renaissance man, somebody who, I suppose, softened as time went on, from a hawk to a dove, etc. All of these sort of sound bites being bandied about, and notably in the Jerusalem Post, where they describe Shimon Peres as someone who became an instant statesman. He had a sort of what would you say? He became it showed a softer side to him and a more tolerant side to him when he became president, as opposed to when he was an active politician. They speak in the Jerusalem Post as somebody who exuded a sense of nobility and humility, a true leader who thought of himself as a servant of his people. As a politician, he was often vilified, says the Jerusalem Post, but as a president, he became a beloved statesman. They also speak of somebody who was very much somebody who evolved with the times, who was very much a Renaissance man. As a young man, when Director General of the Defense Ministry, Peres promoted Israel's defense, aviation and nuclear industries. In later life, he was a keen advocate for nanotechnology, green industry and brain research. Moving to the Wall Street Journal, rather, also very positive. They speak about the fact that he was one of the winners of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994, and for his work on the Oslo Peace Accords. He never gave up on trying to advance peace with the Palestinians, said the Wall Street Journal. Meanwhile, The Guardian does nuance that picture somewhat. Of course, the fact that the Oslo Agreement was not a very big success is something that they point out. He still felt, however, that the two-state solution could be implemented, and they also point out in this article that he's the last surviving figure associated with the founding of modern Israel. So there you go, quite a lot of elogious accounts of his life across the media.
Well, elogious accounts of his life, not always elogious though when it comes to, obviously you were just saying it, the what's become of those Oslo Accords.
That's right. So there are, of course, a number of media that point out some of the more controversial elements of his career. For Al Jazeera's website, they pose this question: was he a peacemaker or a war criminal? In fact, and if you look at the Middle East Monitor, they catalogue 3 areas where his political career could be criticized. If you go down through that article, you have targeting Palestinian citizens. So they speak here about, I suppose, the settlements in particular, having played a key role in the early days of the settlement enterprise. Peres intervened to undermine any sort of measures, no matter how modest, in sanctioning illegal settlements. Also, they speak of the Cana massacre, this in 1996, when 106 civilians were killed when a UN compound was bombed, and also his support for the Gaza blockade. Indeed, coming back to the Cana massacre, which is something really his legacy has not been able to avoid being tarnished by. This is a piece by Robert Fisk, who was present at the Cana massacre, and he says Shimon Peres was no peacemaker, and I'll never forget the sight of blood and pouring blood and burning bodies at Cana. He says that Peres spoke of that as being a surprise, but for him that's a lie, because the UN had repeatedly told Israel the camp was packed with refugees. More criticism from this Israeli left-wing publication, 972 magazine. The man who took part in almost every bad decision in Israeli history, they describe him as being like Forrest Gump, who was sort of present the whole way along, except it wasn't as passive a role as Forrest Gump had. He was an active participant in some bad decisions. On social media, though, just very quickly, you have a lot of people paying homage to him, a hero to the world, says Caleb Park, may he rest in peace. Today, Israel lost a visionary, the world lost a great statesman. This is Trump's running mate. Peres personified courage in the face of battle. You do have 2 images I'll leave you with, François, that sort of sum up that a man of many faces and many images, I guess, and they do refer, this is a Lebanese cartoonist, juxtaposing the Nobel Peace Prize and the Cana massacre. Indeed, he wasn't the only cartoonist to have juxtaposed, I suppose, more aggressive policies with the Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, James Creedon, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.